In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at how to filter group policy using permissions. Filtering group policy allows targeting to be applied to particular users and computers based on the administrator's needs. This can greatly improve what an administrator can achieve and can simplify group policy management. If you consider a typical OU structure used in a company, it may look something like this. Different geographic areas may be separated into different OUs. For example, all users and computers in New York may be placed under the New York OU. To allow group policy to be targeted better, sub-OUs are created for the users and computers. This allows a separate group policy to be created that is for all users in New York and one for all computers. Additional sub-OUs could be created under users, for example for the departments, sales, and HR. Once created, it is a simple matter for the administrator to move the users into the required OU. Then, all the administrator needs to do is create a group policy and apply it to those OUs. The same could be done for computers. Sub-OUs could be created for Windows 7 and Windows 8 computers. Once again, the administrator would need to ensure that the computer accounts are in the correct OUs. This can cause problems. For example, if a computer is upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8, the administrator would need to move the computer account after the upgrade. In small organizations, it is easy for an administrator to manage this. However, as an organization gets larger, it becomes more difficult to manage. Having a group policy system that can change automatically becomes very useful. The rest of this video will look at one way the administrator can achieve this. There are many different ways of targeting group policy. The first way I will look at is using security filtering. Security filtering is essentially a simple way of configuring permissions. It allows the administrator to quickly change the default permissions of a group policy object. The second method I will look at is delegation, which is a slightly more complex way of changing permissions. The last security-related method of targeting group policy is the advanced options. This essentially is direct access to the permissions of the group policy object. So essentially, each method leads to the same results, but each method has its advantages. Let's have a closer look. First, I will open Group Policy Management. Since I will be changing security of the Group Policy Object, or GPO, I will create a new GPO so this will not affect any of the other settings applied to any of the other GPOs. To do this, I will right-click on the domain and select the option Create a GPO in this domain and link it here. For the name of the new GPO, I will enter in Security Filtering. If I select the new GPO, you will notice at the bottom the settings for Security Filtering. By default, Security Filtering will have the group Authenticated Users. This group contains all users and computers that have been authenticated. So essentially, this group contains any user or computer that has been authenticated by a domain controller. If I press the Add button, I can add an additional group. In this case, I will add the Sales group. Once the Sales group has been added, I can select it and press the Properties button. The same information can be obtained through Active Directory users and computers. However, this is a quick way of accessing this information if you are troubleshooting group policy and want to know something like who is a member of a particular group. If I cancel out of here, notice that Authenticated Users is still present. Because of this, all the users and computers that are authenticated by a domain controller will be allowed to read and apply this group policy. To make it so that the group policy will only apply to sales users, I will select Authenticated Users and then press the Remove button. Since Authenticated Users has been removed and I know the sales group only contains users, no computer settings will be configured in this group policy. To capitalize on this fact and make group policy deployment quicker, I will select the Details tab, and then under GPO Status, select the pull-down option, Computer Configuration Settings Disabled. Configuring this will mean only the user settings will be applied and the computer settings will be ignored. If you have a group policy that is only targeted towards either users or computers, you should disable the settings that are not relevant in order to speed up how long it takes group policy to be applied at the destination. Once selected, I will be prompted to confirm that this is what I want to do. If you later add computer settings to the group policy, it can be enabled again. Keep this in mind when troubleshooting group policy. If you later add computer settings, you will need to re-enable these settings. The next tab that I will look at is the Delegation tab. This is where you can give users access to the group policy. This is different from security filtering because users added here will not be given the permission to apply group policy. Essentially, this tab is used if you want to give users the ability to read, write, or delete group policy. When I say users, in this case it would apply to other administrators or someone in a help desk capacity. If I press the Add button, I will add the marketing group. Notice that when I press OK, I will be asked which permissions I want to use. The choices are Read, Edit Settings, and lastly the option to give all permissions. In this case, I will select the Read permission and press OK. Notice that the marketing group has been added with the permissions configured to read. Below this is the sales group with permissions that have been configured to read from security filtering. Users that are in the sales group will be allowed to apply the group policy, and users in the marketing group will not be allowed to apply the group policy. To understand a bit better what has happened, I will press the Advanced button. The Advanced button will effectively bring up the permissions for the group policy. If I select the sales group, notice the permissions that have been allocated below. These are Read and Apply Group Policy. In order for a user or computer to be able to apply group policy, both the Read and the Apply Group Policy option must be ticked. If I select the marketing group, notice that the permission Apply Group Policy is not ticked. Only the Read permission is ticked. The members of the marketing group will be able to read the group policy, but will not be able to apply it. If I exit out of here and go back to the Scope tab, notice that under Security Filtering, the marketing group has been added. Any users, computers, or groups that are added to permissions that have the Read and Apply Group Policy ticked will appear under Security Filtering, so you can see that adding users, computers, or groups via the Add button is just an easy way of making sure that these permissions are ticked. To demonstrate this a bit better, I will select the Delegation tab and then press the Advanced button. Once the permissions have opened, I will select the group Domain Admins. Notice that all the permissions are ticked except the permission Apply Group Policy. If I now tick the permission Apply Group Policy and exit out of here and go back to the Scope tab, the group Domain Admins now appears. So you can see that security filtering and delegation are simple ways of configuring permissions. Security filtering is designed to give users, computers, or groups the ability to apply group policy. Delegation is aimed at administrators or help desk staff to allow them to read and modify group policy. When troubleshooting group policy, remember the only two permissions that need to be configured to successfully deploy group policy is the Read and the Apply Group Policy permission. Now let's have a look at how you would deploy group policy for users in your organization. Let's consider an OU. In this OU, you place all your users. Now, if you want to configure settings for the sales users, you create a group policy and configure security for that group policy for the sales users group. Likewise, a second group policy can be created for the marketing group. This means the administrator does not need to separate the users into separate OUs. Of course, the administrator will need to keep the groups up to date, but usually this is easier than separating users out into separate OUs. The downside of this approach is that a user or computer may have more group policy applied to them. For example, separating the users into OUs would mean the user would only have one group policy applied. When you start using security filtering, you can see that two group policies are now being applied to the same user. One will be filtered out and one will be used. In a later video, I will look at how to use WMI to apply group policy. Using WMI, you can use characteristics of the computer, for example, which operating system is running, in order to apply group policy. Until that video, I would like to thank you for watching and hope to see you in other videos from us.